Welcome to another episode of Living with FASD, Candid Conversations with Patty Casper. This show is educational and human interest stories. It is for those who are impacted by prenatal exposure to alcohol, their loved ones, or anyone that is interested in learning more about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. And what makes this show different from any other show on FASD you might listen to is that your host, me, has both professional and living experience with FASD. So welcome. And this week, I am so thrilled to be joined by the Violence Intervention Program in LA County. I am in Central California where we do not have adequate services. And so the VIP clinic is one of the places where I send folks to. And so I wanted to have the three of you on to talk about services. It's one thing to talk about what is it going on, and it's another to give people the hope that there are services out there. So welcome to Living with FASD, and I will let you guys introduce yourselves.
Thank you so much, Patty, for having us. We're very happy to come and share about what we do at the Violence Intervention Program, which is a community mental health center in East Los Angeles. I am Michele Walker-Bauer. I am a clinical psychologist and the Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Program Manager at VIP. I've been there almost 18 years now and had the wonderful opportunity to be mentored by Dr. Lynn Laboriel, who was hired back in 2006 to create the diagnostic clinic. By sitting next to her, fortunately, I began to learn so much about this disability, and I was helping her with the diagnosing the first 3 years, doing psychological testing, and a lot has happened since then, but I'll stop there and allow my colleagues to introduce themselves. I'm sure we'll pick this up a little later.
I'm Ana Cardenas. I am a licensed clinical social worker and the clinical supervisor at VIP. I have been at the clinic for 12 years. And out of those 12, 11 years have been working with the FASD population. Michele actually trained me in the Triumph Parenting class and in the Families Moving Forward. And I've worked with our community in the East LA area. And now I'm the clinical supervisor and I provide support to the staff.
And I'm Janice Yu. I'm one of the occupational therapists here at VIP, and I started here as a student in 2019 and have been here in different capacities since then. And I've also learned so much about FASD from Michele and from Anna, and have had the wonderful opportunities to collaborate with them to incorporate OT into Triumph and FMF, and also do some of our own program development with the adolescents, as well as provide direct care to a lot of our families as well.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I'm so thrilled to have the three of you here. Michele, maybe you can summarize for everybody what all VIP does offer. And I'm very curious about, excuse me, about the name of your clinic. How did that come about? There must be some kind of history there.
There is. It's a rather long history, which I won't go into, but Dr. Astrid Hager, who is the founder, CEO of VIP, she is a pediatrician who's worked with the county for many years, LA County USC, and she basically in doing she's an expert in sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, and throughout the years, early on, doing a lot of the examinations, forensic examinations, and I believe it was in the 80s when she started to realize there was really no linkage to any type of mental health services. So once a child was medically examined, they often were just left to return home, and she saw the need for not only mental health services but practical resources as well for families with children that have suffered this trauma. And so she started out of a trailer on the campus at the medical center. And I don't know how many years later, to be quite honest, but not too many years later, she was able to, get a building to create the VIP clinic. And now we're a campus of 3 buildings. And we provide services again to many children and families that have suffered trauma and are referred through DCFS, but also in the community of East Los Angeles. But yes, so it's about, preventing the violence, and a lot of it stemmed from the work that Dr. Hager did with
Okay.
children.
So just as an aside, there seems to be some echo or
Okay.
some feedback. Can you check to see if there's anything else open? Just to improve your sound quality. I
Is it
didn't
just
know.
mine? Is it mine?
I think it's just yours. It just started because I didn't hear it when we first sat down.
I don't. Do you still hear it?
A little bit. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what that could be. I don't have anything else
Okay.
open.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We will just have to make do. So, and focus on your words, so, as opposed to focusing on the noise. All right. So diagnostics is one thing that you guys offer. OT is another. And then I heard 2 different programs, Family Moving Forward and Triumph. So what's the difference between those 2 programs?
I'll let Anna actually talk since it's there. She can start with, talking about, I thought I could cover FMF, but let's start with Triumph, as that is the first intervention that we like to refer our caregivers into as kind of a stepping into our program. So I'll let her talk more about that.
Yeah, so Triumph Through the Challenges of FASD is a parenting course that we offer at our agency to caregivers who are English speaking and Spanish speakers. And it is a 6-week weekly course where the parents come and learn about what is FASD. In each week, they learn about the diagnosing process, they learn about primary challenges, secondary challenges, developmental versus chronological age. They learn about interventions. So it's really talking about the foundation of what is FASD. We want them to feel that they are knowledgeable about this diagnosis, because a lot of them come from the diagnostic clinic, first time they ever hear about FASD, and they're like, what is that? So before starting interventions where we're creating behavior plans, or we're really looking at the individual child, we're looking at FASD as a whole. What is it? So we want to educate them. And so it's a total of 12 hours, 2 hours per week. Right now we're offering it via Zoom, and that has allowed us to provide access to this class to parents all across LA County. Because before we used to have it in person, it'd be a little bit more challenging, but after the pandemic and telehealth being an option, we have more caregivers coming from across LA County. And we provide it to anybody who has a child with an FASD diagnosis or suspected FASD diagnosis, who are still on the wait list to be seen at the diagnostic clinic.
Okay. Now, because you are on Zoom, can you broaden your audience to include parents beyond your county borders?
Well, currently we open cases for clients because it's open under the child. We are a community mental health clinic under the Department of Mental Health in LA County. So it has to be children who have Medi-Cal in LA County. That's how we open the case. But we're open to discuss if there's someone who is interested, we can discuss about their case and maybe provide more resources. But currently, since our clinic is under DMH, that's who we offer the services to.
Okay. Good to know.
We do have as Anna said, we do have a small funding bucket for indigent, which in some cases we've offered to caregivers who are highly motivated, who maybe their child doesn't have Medi-Cal, so perhaps people that have gone through adoption, or out of county, and we can do what we, pro bono. So that can be done on a case-by-case, basis, and we have to check with our CFO and make sure that we have the proper funding. But that is something I like to be able to offer to some families several times a year if they're highly motivated and would like to take the class.
Okay. And so the next step after the triumph, which is educating the parents, right? And getting them so that everybody speaks a common language and everybody has the same basic understanding, and that is so helpful, because so often what I hear from, the FASD community, that since I've really made that my workspace now, is that they're given the diagnosis and said, have a nice day. So I love that you guys are doing that. But what's the next step beyond the parent education?
Well, we do offer individual services for the child. If now there are cases where we are collaborating with another agency. If the other agency, for example, is servicing the child, providing mental health services, we will still allow the parent to be open at our clinic to take the Triumph class. And if they're happy with services, we're obviously, that's fine. But many times we do have parents who want to come to VIP to have more FASD informed mental health services. So we, will obviously have the child enrolled in services and receiving mental health individual therapy through that, and obviously, trying to have them assigned to a FASD informed clinician.
Okay.
And we have different programs. So the Birth to 5 program, which has now even more FASD informed, trained clinicians. And then we have our traditional outpatient, which is more for, 6 and up. And then we also have a school-based program, as well as a more intensive program.
Okay.
That also services usually a lot of older children with FASD, just due to some of the more intense needs. So in light of, having the child enrolled in services, and something else we've learned throughout the pandemic is we've noticed pretty clearly that many children with FASD don't generally engage as well, right, on Zoom long term. So that has been kind of something we're working on, trying to help, caregivers understand the need to bring the child in at in-person services, because that we found that to be just much more beneficial. And then through that, we often, the therapist will then reach out to Janice and her team to come in and be part of that. I'll let her talk about that part, and then later I'll talk about FMF.
Yeah, so I think piggybacking off of what you were just sharing, Michelle, a lot of the referrals that we get to occupational therapy are those clients who are so dysregulated at just a baseline level that they are having trouble even accessing the psychotherapy piece. And so we come in to really try to have this bottom-up approach where we're supporting the child and the parent to co-regulate and just kind of create that fundamental kind of level of safety with each other and be able to co-regulate. And from there, we can then, support the client to process their different life experiences that they might have. So I think that is a large bucket of referrals that we get.
Yeah.
And then there is also the sensory processing piece that comes in a lot in terms of children being able to do their, what we refer to as occupations, as occupational therapists, are those activities that, they're expected to do or want to do throughout the day. And so different kinds of sensory processing challenges might become a barrier to being able to, for example, use the bathroom independently or be able to feed themselves. Or, a child's biggest occupation is probably going to school, as well as being able to play with peers and form those healthy social relationships. So those are all areas that we support in intervening in as well, through our specific occupational therapy lens.
And that's huge, because depending on what the campus looks like, it might be that a classroom is within a trailer, right? And it's relatively contained in terms of outside noises, whereas where I went to school, they were, many rooms in one large building. And so the noise just kind of converged. Hard floors, no sound deadening materials anywhere, metal lockers, and it would be just a total nightmare for those who can't filter out audio stimulation. And those school bells, how loud are they? And then all the visual stimulation. Everyone gets all geared up, make the classroom colorful, but that can be just way too much for some of our kiddos.
Absolutely. Those are all really great examples that have definitely come up with the families that I've supported. And I think our collaboration with the school team is huge to try to think about those environmental modifications. And I think as an OT, sometimes we start to think that some of our strategies are very basic, but they might be the first time that a family has heard about something like noise canceling headphones as a tool that they could actually bring into the school if we work through an IEP or a 504 plan kind of process. So that advocacy piece is really important too.
So a lot of the children on my caseload have had a lot of pushback against wanting to wear the headphones. How do you usually get your kiddos to embrace that idea?
Yeah, I think that part of being an OT is really individualizing our strategies. And so when things like that come up, then we start to explore, are there other options such as noise canceling earbuds that might be more amenable for that specific child? Are there ways that we can also train the child themselves to be able to tolerate more kinds of different auditory environments through direct interventions? Are there ways that we can adjust their participation within the classroom so that they get more breaks outside, for example, so that they don't get as overstimulated? So I think we really do try to problem solve with the family and not just kind of recommend these blanket strategies without thinking about, what comes up for every specific child.
And
then
go ahead, Anna.
One of the things, so the children are also working with a therapist. I've had children who do have a lot of issues in the classroom, and I've just straight out asked, what is it that you don't like in the classroom? Why are you running out of the classroom? Why are you throwing things? And many children will say, it's too loud in there. So when they have their therapist, like, wonder what would help you, and like to turn off the noise. Well, let's talk to your OT to identify those strategies. And many of them already started talking about those challenges with their therapist. So when they work with Janice and her team, they're already developing that awareness of those challenges. And they will consider, well, let's try the noise canceling headphones, or some kids with the sunlight, let's try some glasses, or let's try these other strategies, because they've been working with the therapist to identify those challenges that they have and what's causing it.
And there's a lot of pushback against some of these very adaptive strategies. I mean, if you go into a restaurant and somebody's wearing a hat, right? How many people are just like, oh, that's so rude, right? Except it cuts out a lot of the excess visual stimuli, right? Or the sunglasses, that kind of thing. So I'm really glad to see you guys are normalizing those needs and creatively working with people. Do you find a lot of pushback from the school districts in terms of the strategies that you are suggesting, whether it's OT or otherwise therapeutic in other ways?
Yeah, I think from an OT perspective, of course, it's going to really vary depending on the school district, the school itself, the teacher, and all of these different factors. But I feel like there is a general trend towards being more understanding and accepting of different sensory processing needs. And so I found that a lot of schools are actually pretty open to learning about these strategies.
That's
We also have
awesome.
to keep in mind, a lot of these schools are reaching out to us, or we're working with families who have had multiple meetings and a lot of concerns about the child. So when we are going into those meetings, supporting the caregiver who hopefully through our program have learned about advocating for their child, we are there to have a dialogue saying, these are the challenges the child has. And we start the dialogue with explaining what's FASD. This is the diagnosis, and we bring up the information that we're talking about medical diagnosis. So I know when I attend meetings, I do ask for sometimes the nurse to be present because we're talking about health.
Yeah.
And then the nurse being there reinforces that we're talking about brain-based disability and challenges, and therefore we need to address the needs of the child. And then that opens the dialogue of, okay, what is it that can help that child? What is that we can do? If we have some pushback, sometimes it's because of the lack of understanding of FASD. So then the discussions like, what else can we provide you to help you understand this diagnosis? And sometimes I've had nurses who will explain to the psychologist or to the school administrator, this is a medical diagnosis. This is what the family has provided. This is what they're saying that is needed. And we collaborate and initiate the dialogue. And sometimes the school will think about, well, what is it academically? How is this impacting? And we're like, well, if a child's being dysregulated because of the clock, they're going to focus on that clock sound, and they can't focus on what the teacher's saying. Then the teacher calls on them, and now they don't know the answer. Now the anxiety goes up, or the depression because everybody's making fun of them because they couldn't answer the question, and now they can't complete the work. Their grades are going to be affected. So we help them to understand how it all ties into the academics of this one student. And be able to work as a team. And I think once we help them to understand that, once again, a brain-based disability that needs support, then they can be part of that dialogue and identify more strategies. But yeah, a lot of times it starts with psychoeducating the school on what is FASD.
Yeah. And that was something, Michele, that you said at the very beginning that I picked up on when you first started talking about the clinic, was you referred to FASD as a disability instead of a disorder. And we collectively, we really need to emphasize that point, that it's a physical disability as opposed to a disorder, which is much easier to stigmatize. Right. And how, I'm not sure what I want to ask about that, but I'm thinking about the difference between the county where I live and the county where you are. Oh my God, do I wish I could clone all three of you and clone your program and import it up here. But, you know, I can only imagine that at one point, LA County was in the same place where my county currently is in terms of their willingness to embrace the reality that it's a brain-based physical disability. What can you say about that part of the journey for, where you are and how that's enabled you to really step in and meet the needs of your community?
I'll answer this. So I have, been there a long time, and I do recall back early in 2006 to 2009, just helping Dr. Laboria learning about FASD and helping with the diagnostic process through testing. And again, it was eye-opening to me, having been through many years of graduate school and just like, why have I never learned about this?
Yeah.
And I recall 2009 is when I know Dr. Laboria was out, speaking on this throughout the county the first several years. I began also doing presentations probably after about 2010, actually, after being trained in the Families Moving Forward program. And just, I feel like there's been momentum that's been happening over the last, almost 2 decades in LA County. And what's exciting is even the schools, I feel, are more receptive now, probably compared to 10, 12 years ago, when really I think more people are talking about this disability.
Yeah.
Obviously, the educational law that was passed this year has really helped, which is going to only hopefully further, increase awareness.
Yeah.
For educators. And what's, really exciting is, again, being part of this advocacy group, right? FASD Now, for the California advocacy, and then also even within LA County, we're a part of a kind of a learning collaborative, which is just kind of started just earlier this year, just having providers come together and talk about cases. And
That's
and
wonderful.
yeah, so just kind of, to me, it's like a little throwing a pebble and the ripple continues to go out. And, I'm very optimistic. Obviously, there's a lot more work to be done and a lot around stigma. But I think I'll offer, I think, hopefulness for you and your county is, in 10 years, hopefully, there will be more momentum and more people able to create programs or.
I can only hope. Of course, I'm hoping that someone else locally can pick up this torch, because personally, I don't want to be working when I'm 70. If we're looking at that 10-year window, but yeah, there definitely is a lot of movement. And I think FASD United has been wonderful in that, in nationalizing the voice. And I think so often we look at other places like Canada as being so much further ahead, but there are pockets within the states that seem to be further ahead, such as comparing my county and yours, or looking at Florida with the Florida Center. They have so much good stuff going on. Or Minnesota is another place where there is excellence. So I'm really hoping that the FASD Respect Act will pass and we can have a coming back again of those centers of excellence. So I'm only guessing that LA will definitely have a facility as part of that Center for Excellence.
Yes, I don't know about necessarily facility, but I know that we're hoping, obviously, more agencies, right? Because, while we're obviously, pleased that we can provide this, we're one, in a huge county, right? And there's just so much need. And I do think slowly things are happening as more providers are understanding that, many individuals with FASD are just not being identified properly, and how it does, without that lens, without that behavioral neurodevelopmental lens in your work with a client, you're missing a huge piece and often are not as effective in supporting that person. So
it's such an important shift for us to make as a society, to move from the behavioral model where all behavior is intentional, where kids and grown-ups are blamed and shamed and punished, right, for things that are beyond their control because of those primary characteristics of FASD, to one that is neuro developmental lens, right, that it is a brain injury that set all this into motion. So okay, so this has been wonderful, and I know there's so much more we can talk about. What tell me more about families moving forward. I wish I knew more about the program. I know as a self-pay trainee, since I'm only working part-time, it was prohibitive on my part. So, but I've heard such good things about it, and it, like I said earlier, it does have that stamp of having a proven track record of efficacy, being effective. Tell me more about the program and how it helps families.
Well, we're, again, very fortunate to have been trained and have that set our agency to offer families. So I was trained back in, Dr. Laborio was as well, and a few other people back in 2009 by Dr. Heather Carmichael Olson, who's the developer of FMF. and she and her colleagues, we did a video conference training back in 2009, which was kind of, ahead of its time at that point, with the Florida Center. Annika Transick, Dr. Annika, she's also a colleague that we continue to work together in different capacities. But we were trained and began delivering the model, and shortly thereafter, and have had it at VIP ever since. It is an amazing model. I just trained, very exciting, 9 more staff in it over the last month. So at this point, I believe we have 17 staff trained in the FMF program, which is wonderful.
That's wonderful.
Yes. So it's, in a nutshell, yes, it's evidence-based at this point, which is very exciting. Have not only Heather's original research, but there's Dr. Christine Petrinko, who is a very big up-and-coming researcher in regards to FASD, and she is, of course, doing the app. I'm sure everybody's heard about the FMF app, which is, I believe, still needs more time to be figured out, but we're looking forward to that.
Yeah,
that's the point.
I'm looking forward to having her on the show when they get a little bit of the data crunched from their first rounds of data collection from the app.
So she's just taken it, even farther, which is wonderful. But the FMF program, again, is a collateral focus, so caregiver focused intervention. And again, working many years with this population, we know how critical it is, right, to have the caregiver understanding how to support their child and their team. And so we, start with the Triumph as kind of the general, like, learning about FASD, and then we do, often recommend, and we have parents who then want to step into FMF, which now is where you're working one-on-one with an FMF, clinician. And now it's more individualized, right, to that caregiver and that family and that child. So that's kind of the next step for us in terms of helping support families. It is, based on, there's different clinical aspects to it. There's motivational interviewing techniques used to really help with the whole idea of shifting, right, the perspective of the parent, helping them kind of shift and adopt new ways to interact and support their child, right, than what would be deemed more typical type of parenting strategies that are often used.
Yeah.
There's also, basically the treatment processes that we're doing with the caregivers is helping with the reframing, right, which is, of course, the biggest, piece of helping them.
It is the biggest piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then coming from that, then we are helping them learn the brainstorming process, which is really, in a nutshell, kind of a brief, simplified, kind of a functional behavior analysis in a way, kind of looking at what's underlying the problem behaviors, what's the function. We're teaching the parents how to really observe their child's behaviors, looking for, setting events, antecedents, so that they learn this process that when we're done in our journey together in the FMF program, they can continue to use these kind of this process as they're helping their child and any new behaviors come up, and then helping them learn about accommodations, right, which is the more proactive, kind of preventative type of strategies to help improve the child's functioning, which will ideally, hopefully decrease some of the problem behaviors, because the problem behaviors are, linked to kind of the idea of the child being very frustrated with the lack of fit between the environment and the expectations for the child.
Right. And that's a huge piece of it, isn't it? Helping in getting the parents to reframe is getting them used to the idea that observation and interpretation are different.
Yes.
You have to strip away those values and expectations that we tend to have, as a societal paradigm, all the shoulds.
Yes. And it's interesting that, that journey can be, for some parents, for whatever their history, upbringing, right, they're able to kind of engage the reframing a little bit earlier, and then some parents do struggle more, right? And again, we can think about, reasons from right use of their own upbringing, societal expectations that kind of
Exactly.
that. And so again, we utilize at FMF program a lot of the MI techniques, but we also, have the opportunity within FMF. There's an opportunity for individualized sessions to kind of address some of the special, areas of interest or need of that family and child parent. And we are, able to talk about, grief and loss issues. We are able to talk about, the caregiver kind of, managing their own arousal and frustration, right? Which, again, is very normal and understandable given the amount of, stress and difficulty that caregivers of children with FASD can experience.
And there's so many factors that pour into that,
yes.
right? From, their own issues with regulation or dysregulation. So oftentimes we acknowledge that substance abuse and including alcohol abuse is generational, right? But it seems like there's a disconnect between saying, yes, the children have the impacts of their prenatal environment, and the next step is, well, if it's generationally in this family, that means the parents may also have this same disability and requires shifting the way that work is done with the parents. So, and I think that's a missing piece in the way.
I'd say you bring a really good topic, because we also have worked with bio parents. And it has come up in our sessions when we're talking about the information about FASD, where some bio moms are like, you're talking about me, you're describing me. And then they also do that self-discovery, and we work with them utilizing the same techniques we use with their children, we use with them to help them understand the information, help understand what helps the whole family as a system by providing support to the caregiver, who then can also use the same techniques with their child. And that's the beauty about FMF. We can use it with all the caregivers, which can be kinship, grandparents, aunts, uncles. I've even worked with great grandma, foster parents, adoptive parents, but also biological parents. We've been able to work with all of that. And actually at VIP, one of the things that makes us very unique, because of the community where we work, I ended up working with a lot of Spanish speaking caregivers. And that's one of the things that the developer was able to work with us in translating the program into Spanish. So we're able to reach out to more caregivers, because we know there's a large Spanish speaking population in Los Angeles County, and having this available to them is a great tool for those caregivers.
It's a game changer.
Especially for our communities, because I myself am Mexican, being able to talk about this diagnosis that we don't hear a lot about. We really don't talk about it. And now we're having families knowing about it, talking about it, and even sharing information with other family members.
And looking at the cultural pieces, like the county where I am, there's, it is largely Hispanic, but there's also Basque culture, where alcohol is a humongous cultural solidifying element, in part of celebrations and part of daily life. And, that depending on your microculture is more or less something else that you have to educate about. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so excited for the work that you guys are doing down there at VIP. If you want to expand north a little bit.
Okay. Well, so the FMF program, yes, I mean, I feel like it's, again, very, structured. There is a lot of core sessions that really, again, help the parent learn about reframing. But yeah, I think FMF, I don't know if there's any other questions about that, but I did want to, and I'll let Janice kind of talk, because there's some amazing things that she and her team are doing with the adolescents with FASD at our agency. So I want her to talk about that. But I was going to say one more thing, which is exciting, because you were talking about stigma, is that we have recently been collaborating with a residential treatment center in Los Angeles for women, pregnant and postpartum women with substance use issues. And so
Awesome.
we kind of modified the Triumph Parenting class and have brought that to the clients at their center.
Yeah.
And this is our second cycle of delivering it, but very well received by the ladies there. We talk about stigma, we talk about we talk about parenting, we talk about a lot of the stuff which we talk about in the typical Triumph class, but these women were, very interested in the information. And I think, again, talking about stigma and how in the first sessions, what we talk about, it really kind of helps set the tone, I think, for more receptivity about the information and, not getting consumed with perhaps, guilt or shame.
Yeah, because it's not about the vehicle, it's about the substance that does the damage.
Yes.
Right. It's
So
the alcohol.
That's an area that we're really hoping to figure out how to continue, because obviously we see that as a really great, connection with the substance use treatment community.
And do you also educate them about the effects of the dad's substance abuse issues and alcohol use?
I talk a little bit about that. There's a little bit of research that's been done. I know it's still coming, so I do mention. I know we've actually we're revising the Triumph class. I'm adding that. I'm adding a little bit about epigenetics as well, but simplifying it enough to just not to. But definitely saying that there's research that's starting to show itself that male contribution to this disability as well. Yes.
Yeah. And that was amazing. I mean, because I've been familiar for a while with the epigenetic effects. So for the listeners or viewers, think of the do not disturb sign on a hotel door that tells the cleaning staff pass on by, depending on which side of the card you have that faced on. That part of a gene will either get copied and pasted into the replicated cells or it won't. And so it creates many of the same changes or damages, but without the image of, a baby swimming in alcohol. But I've recently seen research showing that even for the first, 3 months prior to conception, that dad's alcohol use can also change the baby's neocortex. So much more directly impacting the child than I had been aware of. And I think that can't help but combat some of the stigma and the shame that women will take on upon themselves. Of course, society's only happy to blame moms, but it shouldn't be that way. We've got to end the stigma. We've just got to. So Janice, exciting new stuff. Tell me what's going on.
I was actually just going to say that this topic is really relevant to some of the thinking that we've done around some of the adolescent programming, because I think when I first came to VIP as a student, adolescent programming was really this gap that Michele and Anna brought to my attention. And the more I kind of delved into the literature, I found that a lot of people with FASD were not able to access these kind of primary resources that were written by and for people with FASD themselves, right? So sharing directly about their lived experiences. And so I think that really motivated me to create our initial group, which is called the FASD Storytelling Group, which is for teens to learn different arts-based strategies to be able to talk about their own story and really process their disability experience. And
to share, this is what it does
exactly.
to me, or that's awesome.
Yeah, I think the goal is really to be able to have them share it with their families, but also with society at large, so that the narrative isn't this stigma-driven narrative, but really showing
Right.
that just like anyone, these teens have different strengths and challenges.
Yeah.
And so I think that is really the purpose of that group. And I've found that a lot of the teens have really important questions that they don't have a space to ask
Mhm.
otherwise. Like, I think something that really stood out to me was a teenage girl that participated in the group had a lot of questions around if she should even have her own child because she was worried about passing on her challenges. And so
Mm.
I think to be able to talk about that is really, really important. And her caregiver had no idea she was even thinking about that.
And that's a huge question, because we do know that, I mean, alcohol affects anything that is being developed at the time of exposure. And for female babies, that includes their eggs for that next generation down.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah, and
huge.
I think to be able to talk about that in a way where that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have your own children,
Yeah.
that nobody with this disability should be stigmatized, and that there
Mhm.
are ways to look at it from more of a strengths-based, supportive
Right.
perspective.
And the other exciting thing about you know, how you're helping your adolescent clients is that it really helps shift the focus from neurodivergent to neurodiverse, right?
Mhm.
Because we are all different. And it kind of normalizes the diversity. And I think that's part of what needs to come societally wide as we really come to grips with the fact that, you know, 5%, that's 1 in 20 kids. One of the stats that was talked about a couple weeks ago in Washington as part of Impact Week, FASD Impact Week, Dr. May, I guess, revised the prevalence to 6.7%. I don't have the reference for the study he put out that showed that, but that's the impact of the first few years of the COVID lockdown. For it to shift that much from 5 to 6.7, that's huge. That's
Mhm.
huge. We're really, I mean, 1 in 20, that's already an epidemic, right? But it's going to be even more so once all these youngsters get to school and their challenges become even more apparent.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I
Oh,
want
go
to add to Janice's comment about her group. One of the benefits of that group is the children or the teens have spent years hearing about their challenges, hearing about what's, quote unquote, wrong with them from schools, from after
Yeah.
school programs, sports. And here they come to a group where they meet other kids just like them.
Yeah.
And they realize that they can do many things. They can have friends, they can communicate with each other. Yes, they can even talk about their challenges and what helps them, but
Mhm.
they get to meet someone else just like them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them have spent years saying, why is it me? Why only me? Because a lot of other children may not know that they may have this, or families don't talk about it. And so it can be very lonely, but the group
Yeah.
allows them that connection, which we know for many of them as they get older, they feel alone. And
Mhm.
talk to adults like, who else has the same thing as I do? And we're trying to open that dialogue with
Yeah.
them and have
Yeah.
them connect. And some of them do connect outside of the group because
Yeah.
the parents are like, I can connect with that other family because they're going to
Mhm.
understand my teen.
Yeah.
They're going to understand. And even when we have other parent groups, the parents like, you will understand if my child is having a meltdown. You'll understand my child
Mhm.
screams at me. You're not going to judge me because your kid will probably
Right.
do the same in a couple
Right.
minutes.
Right.
It's
Right.
that sense of community that these groups provide. That we're trying.
Exactly. There's power in that community. And,
Mhm.
I FASD is only one of the things. Of course, I never realized I was on the spectrum till I was 56. Prior to that, though, I grew up with type 1 diabetes, which is another invisible disability. And back in the 60s and 70s, it was a lot more rare than it is now. I was the only one in my community. I did feel very different. Um, And the most important time of the year for me started when I was 8 and I was old enough to go to diabetic camp. That was so powerful. It was the only week of the year that I felt normal. And of course, even there, I didn't feel fully included. I know now that that's because I was, not neurotypical. But that is so powerful. So I'm absolutely thrilled that you are doing that. And that's why I wrote Sip by Sip, was to present the stories of living experience. What was it like prior to diagnosis? What was our youth like and our young adult years? What was that like? What led up to diagnosis? And then how is that shifted upon getting that diagnosis? And I'm sure you see this with the families that you're working with at VIP. Diagnosis changes nothing and everything all at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Anna, for highlighting that. I
Yeah.
think it just reminds me that one of the moments in my clinical career so far that have really moved me was that very first session of this group. One of the clients did say, before this moment, like, I felt alone. I didn't realize that there were actually other people like me. So yeah, I think just that simple act of bringing some of these folks together in a room and starting that sense of community can be really game changing.
Mhm. And for our viewers and listeners, because so much of my audience are adults, not parents of kiddos, there are spaces out there where you can find this same sense of community. I think when I was researching for, the appendix of my book is a list of resources. And I think when I was digging into it, I think there were like 60 Facebook groups for FASD. That's huge. So community is it is out there. You just have to look for it. But I'm so glad that you guys do you have activities as part of this programming for your teens? Like, do you go out and do stuff?
So I don't think we've done community outings in this group in particular, but it's very hands-on. It's very much using arts-based activities because the literature and just my clinical experience have shown that so many of our clients with FASD are so extremely talented within the arts, even if they might have, challenges with more traditional kinds of academics, like the arts and hands-on activities are really where a lot of them shine. So that's kind of the main thing for this group, but we do have 2 other groups where we do incorporate more kind of community activities. Our second group is the Teen Friendships and Dating group, which is a curriculum that was adapted from the University of Alaska. And that is really focused on healthy relationships and sexuality, which is not a topic that is adequately addressed with people with FASD because they're often perceived to either be asexualized or hypersexualized. And so to be able to talk about it in, an accurate and accessible way was another area of intervention that we found to be very important and something that was also highlighted to me by Michele. So in that group, we also have the teens just learn how to plan, hangouts and dates and form healthy relationships with each other. And so a big component of that is to actually complete the kind of outing that they plan. So we've done kind of sports days or board game days out in the park. And they've, organized what kind of food do they want to bring, what kinds of, sports equipment and things like that all by themselves, which has been really fun to see and participate in.
Yeah.
And then our most recent new group that we've added on is also a group called Create Resilience, and it's an independent living skills group where that's also another big area that's come up a lot with our families is
Yeah.
challenges with just, keeping their room clean, being able to learn how to do laundry, start being able to cook for themselves, right? And kind of transition into that more young adult kind of living. And so we also try to be really hands-on with that group too. So we literally have the teens, cleaning up a room together and figuring out how to do that.
Okay. And I'm very curious about that. I mean, do you have a room in your suite of offices that's set up like an apartment that where people get that hands-on practice, or what
Yeah.
does that look like?
Yeah, good question. We don't have an apartment specifically, but we do have this, full service kind of kitchen area that we use a lot in our treatment services. And
Okay.
that's really been a huge asset to be able to actually like cook a meal together with the team. And then we have to get pretty creative with our other rooms as well. So we actually, for the cleaning session, used one of our PCIT rooms, which is parent-child interaction therapy. And it's actually this one-way mirror where, you can wear a headset and listen to what's going on in the other room and watch what's happening on video. And so my colleague and I, Stephanie, who co-facilitated the group with me, we actually, spilled things, put crumbs, and we had a lot of fun kind of like messing this room up. And then we had our 3 teenage boys that were participating in the group actually work together to clean the room. And it was great, like hearing them find these strategies with each other and actually talk to each other about, wait, how do I turn on this vacuum? How do I, pour out everything that's inside, and just work through it. And I know that one of the caregivers actually called me afterwards and said, my son came home today and he was telling me about how he had so much fun cleaning, and I have never heard that before.
Music to their ears.
Yeah.
So a lot of that basic, the ADLs, right? And basic housekeeping stuff, it's a matter of having not only correct teaching, but habitualizing that, right? Making it. Have you found that it is more difficult to ingrain good habits in your clients? And what's your strategy around that?
Yeah, that can definitely come up as a big area of challenge, is that generalization piece where, a client might be able to understand something at the clinic in the moment when we're doing it during our session, but then the caregiver is telling us, they're not doing this at home at all. So I think we definitely have to have a family-centered perspective where we're thinking about how the caregiver can also support at home to transfer the different strategies, and also work on creating, those visual tools, those checklists, videos, and things like that, where we can continue to teach the client these skills in different kinds of modalities.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Janice. You brought up a great point is, that's what I like with the FMF working hand in hand together, right? Is helping the parents learn these accommodations, these ways to not only support, in a more of a concrete way, but also just communication, right? How is this being communicated to the child, to the teen? And because we know that a lot of times, obviously during adolescence, can be a lot of challenges in relationships between caregivers and adolescents. And so
even when there's no neurodivergence.
Right, exactly. Even during, the neurotypicality, right? That there's a lot of challenges. So what we've kind of been noticing and finding is, and also I will say this is something that we have utilized FMF with caregivers of teens, even though it has not been researched with that population. I have run that by the developer just because I basically, and there's no evidence to support that, but our clinical experience has found that it has been very helpful to, I would say, most of our caregivers with teens, because there's so much good information that it just makes sense for the parents of older, teens. So we found it to be beneficial, I'd say, to most of the caregivers of teens that have gone through it. But that we found a lot that's helped with kind of doing family therapy towards the end of FMF with the parent, and ideally having the young teen with FASD, participating in some of the groups as well as therapy, and then really trying to kind of bring it together with family therapy to help with that relationship, right? Because that is the part that we know will be a protective factor, right? For a young person as they continue to grow and becoming adults, is that relationship with that parent being an understanding advocate for them, understanding how to support their young person is going to, again, really help them be on a better trajectory in life.
And I imagine that's a big piece of the work that you do as kids are approaching that transitional age, and getting families, the children included, to look at the idea of interdependence rather than independence, which our society keeps pushing. But when our 18-year-old teen bodies are only 10-year-old developmentally, independence is not realistic.
We definitely talked, I think during the FMF program, towards the end of our work with the parent, we have a session called Looking Forward. And it is talking about, thinking ahead for their child. And it allows the caregiver to really think, sometimes they don't want to look ahead too far, but, just to even think about how, the next developmental stage and what they can do to really, advocate and support their child and teen move forward. So it is really important.
Yeah, I know one of the challenges, especially with the transitional age, when we're looking at young adults, they want so very much to be on that level platform with their age mates, but they're so much more vulnerable to be preyed upon and manipulated and used and set up by people with nefarious intent. Is that something that you guys address with families in your program?
Yeah, I think that's really come up a lot, especially with the teen friendships and dating program, when some of these teens, start to become interested in romantic and sexual relationships, but might not have an accurate understanding of what consent actually means, what boundaries actually mean, and things like that. So I think we definitely try to really come at that from an angle of safety during that program, and really communicate with the caregivers about how to support that within the home as well.
Yeah. And I know a wrinkle with that is typically they will look for potential partners or dates at their developmental level, which society takes great exception to if that developmental is particularly young. And that's understandable, really, from both perspectives. It's understandable, but it definitely heightens need for education and need for safeguards. I'm excited that you're doing that program.
Yeah, we actually do have a specific session that's just about who is appropriate to date, and talking about, power dynamics, like your teacher is not somebody that is appropriate to date, but also, a younger person, really having that conversation openly, I think, is so important, because I think understandably a lot of caregivers' reactions when they hear that is to have a very protective response and actually completely cut off even the possibility of romantic or sexual relationships. And unfortunately, that can actually really backfire, because teens will then seek that kind of interaction in even more unhealthy and safe ways. So we really try to find that balance.
Yeah. And I think that's part of, you said it earlier when you introduced that group to this audience, was, the temptation to look at those affected with FASD as either asexual or hypersexual. But it just, again, is part of that neurodiversity where we have all the same needs as everyone else, just
Right.
differing skill sets about how to get those needs met.
Yeah, I think that's really like a core philosophy within occupational therapy for me, is to look at a human as a holistic person, right? And as holistic people, we all have different needs and want to engage in different kinds of activities. So how do we look at that from more of a strengths-based, supportive angle rather than a punitive kind of perspective?
Okay. Well, I know we had set aside a certain amount of time for this episode, and we're drawing to a close for that. I want to honor your ladies' schedules this afternoon so that you're not late for other things. But I am so very pleased that you came on Living with FASD. So for our audience, I think it's also very important to have had these discussions because, you know, we're, as adults living with FASD, we're also parents. Hello. And a lot of times we end up with either our own biological children or adopted children who have these same needs. So I'm really, really pleased that you all were able to come on and to spend this time with me on Living with FASD. I can't believe we're wrapping up another episode already. For those who want to get in touch with the Violence Intervention Program, the contact information will be in the show notes. And if anyone wants to learn more about families moving forward, I will have the links for how you can do that. And yeah, if you're in the LA region, absolutely seek them out. And then also, as a certified facilitator of Facets Neurobehavioral Model, I also am able to do professional development training, community organization training. Reach out to me at livingwithfasdpodcast@gmail.com. Email me also if you have questions, if you have suggested topics for future episodes. If you want to be part of a good community, hop on over to Facebook and look for the Living with FASD podcast group. There's also Flying with Broken Wings, which is quite good and has a mix of people living with FASD as well as caregivers. And there are several others. But again, just reach out. And also don't forget on the YouTube channel at Patricia Casper, your FASD coach, there is 2 content streams. One is this podcast, Living with FASD. The other is Free Friday Tidbits, which has to do with the primary characteristics as well as secondary and tertiary symptoms of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and other neurobehavioral conditions. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Have an excellent week, and we will see you again next Monday on Living with FASD. Take care.